Welcome back to the channel. We are in the engine room today. We are working on the 6-liter for Fish Stick, which is a 2001 Z28 F-body Camaro. Catfish, hence the name Fish Stick. If you follow us at all, you probably know a little bit of backstory on this car already. I bought that car, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, and that was kind of like my learning curve for LS engines. Me, Emma, and Eddie, we built 2 motors and did it improperly and blew them up. And then I stuck a junkyard 5.3 in the car. On the test drive, I blew the transmission up. And y'all are probably thinking like, damn, what was you doing, you dumbass? I literally just pulled it out of the yard and the transmission blew up. But where I was a dumbass, what had happened was the 6-liter that we were using was an early model that had the longer crankshaft for a 4L80. It wasn't the hub on the back of the crank. And I had no idea about any of that. So it ruined the 60 in it. And I traded it to a guy for a Suburban, and this guy is, over the past several years, he's had the car and he's been trying to get it running and get it lined out. And then he hollered at us, and the car came in. We were supposed to be doing an oil pump and a rear main in it. Turned out the rear main wasn't leaking, it was the sending unit. But we had already planned to pull the motor to do the oil pump and rear main. Upon going into the motor, we found some really heavy oil contamination, and it kind of just snowballed from there. Or the cylinders ended up being overboard or overhoned. You didn't have the right pistons in it. The ring gap was tremendous. So we sent the block up to Mike Lough, had him freshly machine it and get it squared away and cleaned up. He ended up having to go 40 thousandths over. So we got another set of pistons and rings. We're gonna gap his rings for him, and then we are going to start assembling this thing. Try to get at least a few hours in on it today, mainly because it's so hot outside, and we do have a little window unit in here in the engine room. It's a little break away from the heat, and we need to get this engine built. All right, so over here we got some of his goodies laid out. Got his rods and pistons. Emma did get all the wrist pins slid through the rods and pistons yesterday. We just got to put our keepers on. So we're about to do that now and get that done. Then she can go ahead and put her bearings on the rods, and we'll start getting these rings ready to go. As for the block, we've got it in here bagged up on a stand, so we're gonna pull this thing off. Block looks great. Mike put the cam bearings in for us, and he did have to replace a couple mains, so we aligned on it again. But we're in the clear now. We're gonna start getting this thing ready, get these pistons in it, and try to make some horsepower. All right, so these are a lot like stock clips. They just have a little J on them. I found it easiest to put the stock looking end in first, and you push it around, and then you use a flat blade screwdriver to lock it down in place. Gotta make sure they're in the groove though. That's the most important thing. Snap down in there all the way. And the instructions said that you want that opening at the bottom of the piston. So we're putting all our openings at the bottom. So the first one's a little tricky to get in there. Once you get it started, you can take a flat blade, just gently push. You'll hear it pop into place. And just make sure it's in there all the way around. Flip it over, push your wrist pin down. Remember, we want our opening at the bottom of the piston. Kind of split the difference. And the trick here is you want to push in and down at the same time. Get the whole ring in the hole, and then just pop right in. Now we're gonna gap his piston rings. Plans to spray a little bit of nitrous on this thing later on down the road. We discussed it with him. We're gonna gap these things a little bit. We already stuck number 1 in, the top ring for number 1. Measured it, it's a 16 thousandths. I have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure we're gonna go 20 on the top. I don't remember what the second one was. So we're gonna have to go back and make sure we're getting our specs right, but not a problem there. So right now all I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm inserting the top rings in the block. That way I can measure all of them. We can record our measurements and know exactly how much we need to file each ring. And then when these come out of the cylinder, they need to be laid out on the table in the format that they go in the block. That way you know what ring came out of what cylinder. And then we'll do the same thing for the second rings. Rule of thumb is going to be, if you have a dot, you're going to find the dimple or an etched dot, like a laser etched. And on these, there is absolutely no dot on either side, which means this ring can go either way. So we're just inserting the top rings, and I'm just going to gently slide her down in there. And then once it's in there, to try to keep it as true and flush as possible, they make a tool for this, but I don't have one. So I'm just going to use a piston until it's relatively even all the way around. A few more of these to slide in, then we're going to take some feeler gauges and mic these. See what all our ring gaps are right now with this bore, with these rings, and then we'll go from there. We're over here at our ring filer. All right, so I got the top ring for cylinder 1 right here. I've already done 3, 5, and 7. If you barely put enough pressure on this tool to where it's making contact with this, our disc in here is a little crooked, so it wants to skip. It makes contact and then it doesn't. So I'm applying just a little bit more pressure to get it to make contact all the way through the revolution. And I've noticed about every 8 to 10 revolutions is taking off about a thou. So in this case, we need to take off 6 on this one. Of course, I'm not going to just jump in and go 60 turns on this thing. I've been starting out with anywhere from 25 to 30, depending on where the ring's at and what it was when we measured it off our base measurement. So we'll go ahead and do like 25 or 30 on this. We'll stick it back in the block and we will test fit it. Is a little tight, but we can get a 20 in there. All right, so we need to go two more thousandths. So we'll do about another 15 rotations on it and see where we land. So you might be asking yourself where I got 22 thousandths is where we need to be. So what I did was I found a chart on GPI's website, and it tells us you're going to multiply the bore, the overall bore, times 5.5 thousandths. Now where that 5.5 thousandths comes in is he's going to be spraying a little bit of nitrous on this thing. Now that 5.5 thousandths is going to cover us up to about 150 shot of nitrous. That's not guaranteed. That's not a dead set rule of measurement, but it's a general idea. Now for this particular block, we had to go 40 thousandths over of the stock 6.0, so it's 4.040. So we took 4.040, we multiplied it times 0.0055, and that got us 0.02222. So that's why we chose 22 thousandths. Now I'm gonna take another 15 revolutions off this thing, and we're gonna measure it again. And then on the top two. We're shooting for that 22. We'll try it. 22 does not fit. Let's try the 21. So we had a tight 20 last time on this one. Now we got a tight 21. Take a few more off of it. Fit 21 a lot better. Let's try this 22. Alright, now we got 22 in there. So we got the rings gaps, 22 thousandths, first and second rings, both gapped to 22 thousandths. Now Emma's putting the main bearings in the block, and we're gonna set the crank down in here, plastic gauge this thing, and see what our bearing clearances are. Got our plastic gauge laid out on the crank. We're gonna go ahead and bolt down all the main caps and check all of them. And see what our bearing clearances are. I'm looking for somewhere around 2 thousandths. We'll set these down in place, then we're gonna set our bolts and studs in, torque them down to spec, take them back out, and we'll show you guys how to measure the clearance. As you notice, we are putting these caps on dry, but we did oil the main bearings in the block before we set the crank in. And once we check this and clean the bearing surfaces, get all the plastic gauge off, we will lube these up and put them back on. Alright, so we got these laid out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're gonna measure our bearing clearance. So the fatter the mark, the less the clearance, because the more it's smashing that plastic gauge out. For you guys that don't know, plastic gauge is just a small filament type piece of plastic. When you put it in there and it smashes it, it goes out to a certain thickness based on what the clearance is. So like I said, the wider one, so that'd be 1 thou right there. We're not quite at 1 thou. Like 1.5 on number 5. We're not at 2, so I'd say that's a solid 1.5 thou on number 5. And right here it looks like on number 4 we're right at 2. So 1.5 and 2 thou. I'm gonna take number 3. That's probably like a 1.7. So in between 1.5 and 2. At least we got some consistency going on here. And that's a solid hefty 1.5 right there, number 2. And last but not least, number 1, the last one to get oil, is a solid 2 thousandths clearance. Which I would rather that one be a little looser than a little tighter, so that works out. Alright, so now we can document these as what they come out to be, clean all this stuff off these bearings and off the crank, and we can bolt these things in the block for final assembly. Alright, so we got the crankshaft in the block. All the main caps are torqued down. This thing turns over great. Alright, we got our plastic gauge in place for this rod cap here, number 1. We're gonna run this thing down, torque it, and pull it back off and see what we're looking at. We are running an ARP 12-point bolt in these. So we're gonna have to look at the torque specs for those as well, because they are different than GM stock stuff. Alright, so spec for these is 40 to 45 foot-pounds. These have already been ran once, so we're going to take them to 42. So same thing as the main caps. Now we're going to take this rod cap loose, pull it off, and measure our clearance. We're going to call that a 1.5 thou. So I went back and looked, and GM spec is 2 to 2.5 thou on main bearings. So we are a little bit on the tight side on the main bearings, but we're still safe enough to run a 530, which is a stock oil weight for this thing. If we're not happy with oil pressure, then we'll play with oil weights. It may end up wanting something a little bit thinner, but I don't think we're really going to have any problems with it. It turns over great by hand. Now we're going to go ahead and clean this plastic gauge off the crank and then the rod bearing, and get this one, go ahead and get this one torqued in, bolted in, and then we might try to knock a few more in before we call it a day, but it's about quitting time for us. Alright, so we got bank 1 in before we left yesterday. Rods and pistons. All 4 of them bad boys are torqued down, ready to go. About to turn this block over and put in bank 2 now. See if we can't get the top end in this thing. Get this thing ready to go back in the car. So we still have the blue C7 out there in the air. Drivetrain's in the floor. We'll try to get a little bit of time on it today. It is the hottest week that we've had this year here in Arkansas. When there's not a breeze or a draft at all coming through that shop, man, it becomes too hot to be out there. It just creates like this little corner of stagnant air. We'll probably get out there and work on that a little bit today. We're trying to take advantage of the hot weather and get caught up on a few things in the engine room that we've been needing to do, like build this 6-liter. We did have to order Ls3 head gaskets for this thing because of the bore size. It was too big for the 6-liter head gaskets, the Ls2 head gaskets. So we got those. That was the last piece of the puzzle we were waiting on. Does have a set of head bolts or head studs for this thing that were previously in it, so we'll be putting those back in it. We've got him a BTR Stage 3 Ls1 Ls2 cam, a new set of Ls7 lifters, and of course we got all new rings and bearings and everything in here. We plastic gauged everything as y'all saw before, but we're about to dive back into this thing, get bank 2 installed. So we did notice something on number 4 when we went to put number 4 in. And if you're not familiar with LS rods, the connecting rods are fractured. So they have a rough break in them and it causes a natural adhesion. And I noticed when we knocked number 4 piston in, I was looking at the rod. As it snugged up, we still had you could still see a gap between them. And really once they're torqued, it should look like a smooth, seamless transition on the side of the cap there. And what we noticed was, appears that maybe a couple of the rod caps were torqued backwards. It caused a few flat spots, the rough texture of that fracture, and it's allowing the rod cap not to close up all the way against the rod. Luckily we had some Gen 4 rods here at the shop, so we swapped 2 of those out. Alright, so when you're looking at these LS rods, like I said, when you torque this down, you're not going to see that little crack there. So if we take this rod cap off, you can see that it's textured from where, essentially what they do at the factory is they stick this deal in here. It's like a 2-jaw spreader, and they spread it and it cracks the rod right there in the seam, the center. And both sides have that texture, and that allows it to have, if you put it on there backwards, you see that that thing does not line up at all. But if we turn it around, it closes our gap really well. And if you get this backwards and torque that thing down, it's going to cause these imperfections. You can see these lighter silver, kind of lighter gray colors, little spots. And that makes it to where this rod does not want to adhere and close up like it's supposed to on either side, which in return can cause some pretty big problems. So we swapped these 2 rods out for him. The last thing I want is this car coming back with bottom end issues. We got 1 more piston to knock in. We're gonna record that one in real time. We're gonna get these things torqued down. We're gonna slide this cam in and try to get this thing as close to ready to go back in the car today as possible. But let's dive back into it. All right, so the way we set the rings up on the piston is the arrow is gonna face the front of the block. This is a passenger side piston. This is cylinder 8. The arrow facing the front of the block actually needs to face that way. But for demonstration purposes, I want to show you. If you're standing on the passenger side of the block, looking at the block, the arrow is going to be at 3 o'clock. We want the gap of our oiling ring to be somewhere around 6 o'clock. Our 2 rings to go with the oiling ring, we're going to have one about 11 or so. We're going to have one about 1 or so. Second ring and top ring at 3 and 9. So just make sure that's right. Now I'm going to take this, oil my cylinder up. Oil our rings up just for installation. Get skirts of the piston a little bit. Go ahead and hit that wrist pin one more time. Make sure my arrow is facing the front of the block. Drop it in our handy dandy Proform 4040 tool. That thing's set down in place. Now I am knocking this in upside down from what I just explained it to you, so that means our arrow is actually at 9 o'clock facing the front. And then we're just going to gently hold our tool in place on the block. Get it all the way within the block, remove the tool, and we're just going to gently tap this thing down, and then it'll tell us when we're close. Alright, so she's in there all the way. Now we're going to put the rod cap on. Make sure to lube this thing up. We're using a driven HPL. That's what you'll see us primarily use. Occasionally we'll use the green Lucas. But we've grown pretty fond of this stuff right here. So now we're going to just push this on. Make sure our gap closes up there. And we're going to rub our bolts in. 42 foot-pounds. Alright, so rotating assembly is in the block. We're going to turn this thing over by hand a few times, make sure it does what we want it to do. And then we will proceed with camshaft and lifters and all that good stuff. Smooth as butter. Alright, so Emma's going to get these lifters pre-soaking. We're going to start this cam in. Ironically, we put a Ls1 Ls2 Stage 3 cam from BTR in a 6-liter when we had fish stick and blew it up. So it's actually kind of cool that not only are we getting to do it in a 6-liter, but we get to use the same camshaft. So we're going to turn this thing over, get our tool bolted up here. Ain't much new there for you guys. I'm going to slide this thing in here. This thing up real good. Keep it nice and easy. Sometimes they try to be difficult. Yeah, this thing does have some pretty gnarly lobes on it for what it is. And we'll pull our tool off and get the camera tanger plate on this thing. Should be ready for a timing set. Alright, so camshaft's in, timing set's on. Got all that done. Now we are going to open up our lifter trays, install these lifters, thing ready for a set of cylinder heads. Alright, so when Jason got fish stick from me, it had the Junkyard 5.3 in it. He pulled that out and they rebuilt this 6-liter and put it in its place. A local machine shop did all the machine work on the block, and the heads. When the car came here, it only had about 50 miles on the build. He took it to have it tuned. They were thinking that it had a lot of blow by and that it was blowing the rear main out. It did have a drop in oil pressure. When the car got here and we drained the oil looked awful, especially for a 50-mile engine. So we contacted him. At that point, we'd already planned on pulling the motor out to do the oil pump in the rear main. Then that's when we found that it wasn't the rear main leaking, it was the sending unit at the back of the block at the top. Rear main was dry as a bone. But as we took it apart, we found hot spots on the rod bearings. The main bearings were trashed. Then he explained to me that they did gap the rings in this thing. I checked the ring gap of the rings that were in the motor, and it was an ungodly amount. So that's when we mic'd the cylinders, found out that they were overhoned. We regrouped, we sent the block up. The block's been worked, we got new pistons. He bought a new crank because the other crank had already been turned. As for his cylinder heads, you can tell it wasn't long ago these things were milled, but we cleaned them up. They're not perfect, but they are cleaner than what they were. All the gasket surfaces are good, and the inside of the heads are clean. So we're about to slide these head studs in this thing and get these heads set down on here. We really need to check for some piston to valve clearance. All right, Emma got all the head studs in, and I ran down to the Dollar General and got us some modeling clay so we can test our piston to valve clearance, make sure we're good. All right, so one reason we're checking piston to valve clearance on this particular motor is because I'm not exactly sure how much Mike decked the block. We are running a flat top piston, and I'm pretty sure these heads were milled in the previous build when the owner of the car initially had the 6.0 put together. We've got our modeling clay in place under cylinder 1. We're going to torque this head to spec, put our push rods and rockers in for cylinder 1, and turn this thing over a few times, and then pull this head back off and see what the clay looks like. Hopefully we have plenty of clearance and we'll be able to slap this thing together the rest of the way without any issues. This isn't typically something we would do if we were using stock dish pistons and heads that hadn't been milled and the block work wasn't so severe. It's kind of just like a precaution at this point. Driver's side cylinder head on with our molding clay underneath. We just got all the head bolts torqued, slid in the number 1 exhaust and intake push rods, and torqued down the rocker arms. Now I'm going to spin the motor over completely, get it back to this state, and we're going to pull all this stack apart and see what the molding clay looks like. Alright, so we got plenty of piston to valve clearance right here on number 1. I'm gonna pull this clay out of here, clean this thing up, and get these heads put on. we got the heads on this thing, we got them torqued. We got the push rods and the rocker arms in it. We still got to do the oil pump, the front cover, the oil pan, windage tray, and all that stuff. But that's going to sum it up for this episode. Be looking out for the episode where we install this engine in the Catfish Camaro and get it fired up and running. Bring life back to something that has not been right for several years. And remember, be looking out for the episode where we tear the entire drivetrain out of a C7 Corvette to replace a torque tube and a busted oil pan. That episode's coming soon as well. Follow us on our socials at 727 Motorsports, Facebook, TikTok, and Emma's talked about trying to be more active on Instagram, but we're just not very active on there. Smash that subscribe button, let us know in the comments what kind of content you guys want to see, and until next time.